This is a true horrifying story, part 38. Some of you may find this very scary, but I honestly cracked up for the first time hearing a jinn story like this. This story took place in Qatar in the year 2004-2005. Now I cannot use the real names of these people, so I'm just going to introduce them as Ahmed and Abdullah. Now Ahmed is the person that told me this story. He's a 65-year-old ex-military Qatari man. He's best friends with Abdullah ever since they were recruited in the military at the age of 18. Till this very day, both being in their 60s. Back in 2004-2005, they were both in their 40s, high-ranked in the military. Now Abdullah's father passed away, Allah yarhamah, a couple of years after the story happened. Abdullah's father was an old man that dealt and cooperated with jinns. But he never hurt people, nor did black magic or anything like that. He just dealt with them for his own benefit or his own pleasure. One day, Ahmed and Abdullah were out cruising on a day off late at night in the winter. They picked up some tea and cigarettes and they parked in a deserted old parking lot. Ahmed notices a creepy black cat just chilling next to some bushes, and this cat was just staring at them the whole time they were outside drinking tea. He tells Abdullah and he points at the cat. Abdullah puts a smirk on his face. He goes to the back of the car and pulls out a loaded double-barrel shotgun. He takes 2 shots at the cat, but apparently he misses. The cat just scampered away. 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes later, they both hop in the car and Abdullah gets an international call on his mobile. He picks up and it's his father speaking. His father called from London. He was at London at the time. Abdullah, what the heck have you done? What did I do? What the heck have you done? Yuba, what have I done? He says, the individuals that I'm friends with told me that you tried to kill one of their sons. You almost killed a jinn, and they told me to warn you, because the next time you try harming any of them again, they will take your life. He freaked out. He knows his father's little secret that he does with the jinns. The cat was a jinn. Took them minutes to pass the message from the Middle East to London, and surprisingly, they let it slip. This is for real. Don't mess with stray animals, especially at night. This is a true horrifying story, part 39. The birth of Satan, Iblis. In other sacred texts, he's known as Lucifer. Non-Muslims refer to him as a fallen angel, but Muslims believe that he was never an angel. Angels are made from nur. Iblis was made from fire. Therefore, he is a jinn. He is the biggest jinn, the strongest jinn. And God had so much love for Iblis that he lifted him and he was valued amongst the angels. And then Adam was created, the first human being. Iblis was jealous. God ordered all beings to do sajda for Adam. Out of all beings, Iblis was the only one that refused. And he said, I was made from fire. This being was made from dirt. I will prove to you that Bani Adam is not the righteous being. Adam, Eve, Iblis, and the angels all lived in paradise. Everyone was banned to eat fruit from a specific tree. Iblis manipulated Adam and Eve and they ate from that tree. They had to face consequences, so they were all kicked out of heaven. And that is why people call Iblis a fallen angel. He was never an angel. Iblis asked God if he can have an eternal life, so he can prove that humans are sinners. And that's his task. This is what he lives by. This is the birth of Satan. He gathered the shaitans, and now he has an army. He is the leader of all demons, and he will be the only being on earth that dies last. Iblis today sits on a throne. Nobody knows where he's located. However, in an authentic hadith sahih, the Prophet said that his throne is on water. So we don't know where, but we do know that he's somewhere far in the ocean. There's a short story of a French Arab woman that was possessed by a very powerful jinn for many years. The toughest sheikhs carried exorcisms to treat this woman. But before they kicked the demon out, the sheikhs wanted to ask a few questions. They asked the jinn, where is Iblis located? Without a hesitation, the jinn responds, we visit Iblis in the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. Some scientists have said, but still did not prove, that the Bermuda Triangle has a magnetic field that caused all these ships and planes to disappear. Now that's just a theory. Now legitimately speaking, a demon has spoken, and he exposed the location of where his leader possibly stays. But could it be Iblis? It is far beyond a question mark. It is in fact a section in the ocean that will kill you if entered. This is a true horrifying story about the most dangerous game to play. And no, it is not the Ouija board. This game is called the Corners game. People sent me a podcast video of two guys explaining how it's done. I've heard of this game a while ago, but since people are talking about it now, I'd love to step in. I genuinely warn you from playing this game, because it is extremely dangerous whether it was done right or wrong, and it does involve summoning an evil presence. Even if I didn't explain to you guys how it's done, you guys are probably gonna Google it either ways. The Corners game is a summoning ritual. In Islam, it is equivalent to practicing black magic. You need 4 participants. No additional players are allowed in the room. A room with 4 corners. No more, no less. All the lights in the room must be switched off. All players must enter the room one by one, speaking their name out loud 3 times. One principal is appointed as the speaker. The speaker stays in the middle of the room, and the remaining 3 players must pick a corner each and face the wall. The door should be shut, and when everyone is inside, no one is allowed to speak. When everyone is in position, the speaker counts to 3. And on 3, all participants must rotate clockwise to the next corner. Now there are 4 other procedures that I don't wish to explain further. But throughout the game, remember, there's always one empty corner. Now people say that one of the principals may disappear. But one thing for sure, an entity in the shape of a figure will appear in one of the corners. There is an emergency procedure of calling your name backwards, but I don't know if that will avoid getting you injured. A group of guys from Japan have played this game. No one disappeared in thin air after the game was done. However, one of the players never seemed the same after playing this game. During their 3rd rotation, they saw a figure move in one of the empty corners. The figure is a jinn, and jinns feed off from empty corners. That is what we know of them in Islam. In households, jinns camp in corners, ceilings, or even toilets. The player that is in most fear will be possessed. And the player that was possessed from playing this game passed away a couple of years later. They were all young men in their late 20s. Sometimes dangerous rituals are commercially sold as games, such as the Ouija board. But they are just dangerous portals. You are literally creating a portal from the jinn world to your own room by playing such games. I didn't even explain how the game is done. If you Google the rest of the procedures, that's your responsibility. Stay away. This is a true horrifying story that took place in Zarqa, Jordan. Muhammad, a 19-year-old Jordanian, back in 2011, he was hanging around the neighborhood with his friends. A 40-year-old looking man pulls up in his car right next to where they're sitting. He looks out the car, points to Muhammad, and asks him to come. Muhammad at 19 was a tall and muscular young man. So he goes to him, and the man seemed very friendly. They chit-chat for around 10 minutes. Now put in mind, that man is a stranger. He asks Muhammad, "Hop in my car, let's go to my place. I'll show you my house." Muhammad was shocked and creeped out. He thought that man may have been interested in a young muscular man like himself. But he also felt confident, because he knew if things went wrong in that man's house, he could take him down. Muhammad looks at the back of the car and he noticed a black dog. Muhammad loves dogs so much, he said, "You have a dog?" And the man replied, "I have a lot more dogs at my house." They hop in and they reach the man's house. And Muhammad says, "I saw the most unusual antiques I have ever seen." He had a cross statue right next to an Islamic one. He had a maid that looked very unusual and she did not speak a word. It was so strange. The same dog that was in the car was on the couch, just chilling there. He immediately knew what kind of man he was. He faked a phone call and he told the man that he has a family emergency, and he dipped. Muhammad went back home and saw his mom. He told her everything, and she did not take it easy. She was so furious that this happened to her son. She grabbed a small bottle of water and she forced Muhammad to take her back to that same house. They reach outside the gates and she asks Muhammad to open the door. At this point, it's pretty much impossible to control a mother that's furious about her children being in danger. She walks in, she sees the dog and the maid. She sprays the water she had in the man's house. The dog and the maid vanish. The old man starts screaming his lungs out. "Please, please, I will not come anywhere close to your son again. Please stop." She leaves with Muhammad, and in the car she tells him, "That man is a sahir, a black magician. The black dog is a ashiq of yours. She's been wanting you for a while. She couldn't come inside the house because our house is blessed. The black dog was a jinn and the maid was a jinn. The only way she could come to you is through that sahir." Muhammad is 30 years old today. He lived in Europe, he lived in Jordan, he lived in Dubai, and in every country he's been to, he still sees that same black dog watching him from a distance. This is a true horrifying story which covers more about the Dajjal. For those who don't know who the Dajjal is, please refer to part 35 for a detailed explanation. A summary of part 35: Dajjal is a human being. He either lived for more than 1,000 years or he will be born one day. In other religions, he is known as the Antichrist, the false Messiah. The Dajjal is a master deceiver. He will make people think he's God. In Judaism, the false Messiah that is yet to come is believed to be the real Christ. Most of mankind will be deceived thinking he is God. Most of mankind will be his followers. They are unbeatable. In many ahadiths, the Prophet said that the Dajjal will have supernatural abilities. But back then, they might have been supernatural. But with today's technology, these abilities are very doable. In one narration, it's said that the Dajjal will cloud up the sky and pour rain. Another one says the Dajjal will be riding on something that flies. These narrations were said 1,400 years ago. Both of these abilities with modern technology are possible. So we don't really know if the Dajjal has legitimate power or if he'll be using modern technology to deceive people. When the Dajjal is out, he will force people to worship him. And if you refuse, your money, your income, and your food will be taken. But how can this be? How can the Dajjal empty my bank account? You're thinking, no one has access to our money, right? But this is the thing. There is a new global integration that was discussed among political leaders and big firms. A global blockchain integration was announced, a new invention for money. All the money sometime in the future will be purely digital. No more banknotes, no more cash. Every single transaction will be traced. And all governments will use the same integrated system that has access over everyone's money. Now, this technology may sound good, but it also may be very bad. Because with a click of a button, boom, all your money can be taken away. This is far beyond creepy. Because when the Prophet spoke about this ability, where the Dajjal can make your money vanish, the Sahabas couldn't comprehend it. But thinking about it now, while we are in the future, it all makes sense. The Dajjal is very, very close. All the major signs of his arrival have happened. The technological abilities, the fasad, the new world order. He is coming, and only one person can save us. This is a true horrifying story, part 43. I know I've been gone for a few days, but I came to Germany for a quick holiday. This is more on the Bermuda Triangle, one of the strangest, most horrifying places on earth. In part 39, I spoke about how the throne of Iblis may be on the Bermuda Triangle. Let's forget about Iblis now. The news have stated that 50 ships and 20 airplanes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. But how is it defined by scientists? Some scientists have said that it is common for big natural storms to hit that side of the ocean. Therefore, the ships and the planes were destroyed from these storms. And others say that there might be a magnetic force under the water which may attract many compounds. A pilot by the name Bruce Gernon flew over the Bermuda Triangle on December 1970. Bruce was flying through a big cloud, and the instruments in the plane stopped functioning properly. 30 minutes later, Bruce flew through another cloud, and he realized that this cloud was the same cloud he went through 30 minutes ago. The clouds started to tunnel around the plane, and then minutes later, he made it through. But not just made it through, he arrived at his destination being 2 hours early. The time span above the triangle was supposed to be a flight of 2 hours, but apparently it took this pilot 2 minutes to cross over. Now in Islam, in a couple of ahadith sahihah, the Prophet said that Iblis, who is known as Lucifer, is on water. His throne is on water. There's also another recording of a pilot that also flew over the triangle, and before this pilot disappeared, he tried explaining what he was seeing, but it was too late. On the radio, he said that he was flying through black smoke. He couldn't see anything, but when he was able to see, he saw a lot of strange things that are not humane. If you somehow come close to the throne of Iblis, you will probably not survive. No one can 100% guarantee that the Bermuda Triangle is the throne of Iblis. But strangely, this part of the ocean has taken many lives. And let's not forget this. Many of you might not know this. We have explored only less than 5% of the whole ocean. It is a world way bigger than ours. And I can confirm that Iblis lives somewhere in that world. This is a true horrifying story of the cab driver in Jordan. This story took place around 1991 or 1992. Yusuf, a Jordanian cab driver, was driving around an old village at night. He was on his way home, about to end his shift. On his way, he sees a young 19, 20-year-old girl that was struggling to get a ride. He pulled up next to her, and she seemed very shocked that he saw her and tried to help out. She hops in the car and she asks him to take her home. She leads the way and they finally reach. She thanked him and she hopped out the car. She gets closer to her house and she just stares at it. He noticed what she was doing, so he rolls down the window and he shouts, "Hey, get inside your house." She turns her head, smiles at him, and starts walking towards her door. Yusuf's house was around a 40-minute drive from that area. He starts driving back home, and 30 minutes in through the drive, he looks at the back of the car and he notices a handbag. The girl that hopped in forgot her bag. He rolls his eyes and turns around because the drive back to her house is going to take another 30 minutes. He reaches the same house. It was very dark. There were no lights. He knocks on the door. He rings the bell. The bell does not work. He gives up and he decides to come back in daylight. Yusuf wakes up the next morning and immediately goes to this girl's house with her handbag. He knocks and knocks for several minutes. Nobody answers the door. A bunch of guys walk past him and start laughing at him. He turns around and asks about what's going on. They tell him, "You're knocking on a house that's been empty and abandoned for 15 years. Yusuf says, "It can't be. I dropped a girl here last night and she forgot this handbag." They ask Yusuf to describe how she looks like, and he did. The guys started to look extremely uncomfortable. They told him that the girl he described was an actual resident in this house. This girl and her whole family died many years ago in an unexplainable death. And the handbag that you're carrying right now is hers. A stolen, lost handbag. It contained all her items, her documents, her papers. Her relatives and the authorities were looking for this handbag for many, many years. But who was the girl that hopped in the car? This is a true horrifying story of a man who read the book Shams al-Ma'arif. For those who don't know what this book is, please refer to part 25. It is the second pinned video on my page. Shams al-Ma'arif is one of the world's most dangerous books. It carries one of the most dangerous rituals of summoning demons. Stay away from this book if you ever see it. This story took place in Egypt about 2 years ago. I don't know much about this book, but after I heard the story, I discovered some extra information of what this book contains. There are a couple of pages, around 4 or 5 pages inside this book, somewhere in the middle. They contain names of jinns. Part of the ritual is reading all these names, and one of the jinns on these pages will be summoned. A man in Egypt got this book from an old friend. His friend warned him many times about reading the book, but he insisted. Before the owner gave him the book, he ripped out these 4 or 5 pages that contain the names of the jinns. Because out of all rituals in the book, that one specifically is the most dangerous one. He rips the pages out and hands him the book. That friend takes the book back home and starts reading it. As he reads the book, strange things would happen. He would hear knocks inside his house. Small things would light up on fire, and the tap water would run in the toilets. He knew such things would happen. He ignored everything and continues reading the book. All of a sudden, someone outside rings the doorbell. His whole body froze from fear. He opens the door and sees a short, old man. He looked very unusual. His feet were abnormally big. The skin on his face seemed like it was rubber, and his hands were as dry as a rock. The old man looks at him and says, "Stop reading the book." And then he left. Ever since that day, wherever this guy goes, he would see that old man everywhere. At the supermarket, at the gas stations, outside mosques, in his neighborhood. This guy decided to give the book back to his friend. When he gave the book back to the real owner, the owner immediately turns to the pages that he ripped out before handing him the book. And he witnessed something terrifying. The pages that were ripped out were stitched back inside the book. He quickly asked him if he reached and read those pages. He said yes. Ever since I read this chapter, this old man has been following me everywhere. This is a true horrifying story of the tomb of Tutankhamun. I spoke about black magic in many of my episodes. I revealed the terror and the dangers behind its rituals, such as the books Al-Ghazali and Shams al-Ma'arif, the cursed houses, the buried spells, and a lot more. However, the age of when black magic was the biggest, the strongest, and the most dangerous was the age of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt. Black magic back then was nothing compared to what it is today. Allahu A'lam, but from the stories I've heard, I even believe that the jinns were a lot more powerful than what they are today. In Surah Taha, a chapter in the Quran, it talked about black magic and how it was so strange. Black magicians would use jinns to deceive people. They used to throw their ropes on the ground and they would move like snakes. All of these things were made by jinns back in the day of Prophet Musa. Many jinns used to worship these kings, and they would provide most of their energies to execute their demands. Tutankhamun is the last of them. He was the last pharaoh of the royal family at the end of the 18th dynasty. These kings were worshipped by jinns, and when they died, their tombs were still protected by jinns. Many people have died trying to open their tombs years after their death. And the reason behind it is these tombs are guarded by black magic. If you go near an untouched tomb from ancient Egypt, you will most probably die before cracking it open. During the grand opening of Tutankhamun's tomb, 13 people have died soon after the ceremony. The archaeologist Howard Carter was the lucky one that opened his tomb. But of course, he died as well a few years after that. Now, Tutankhamun died more than 3,000 years ago. A lot of people tried to open that tomb is because it carried a lot of treasure. The tomb itself was made of gold, and we have reports of people that died only from the 20th century from opening this tomb. But just imagine how many people have died trying to open this tomb throughout these 3,000 years. That's how strong the curse is. The jinns have protected his grave for thousands of years. This is a true horrifying story that took place in Ar'ar, Saudi Arabia. This story has also been aired on TV by a couple of imams confirming it. I will add the video source in the comments. A Saudi Arabian man from Ar'ar has 4 brothers. All 4 brothers are married except him. People always ask him, "Why didn't you get married yet?" And he always gets aggressive when someone asks him about marriage. He hates it. He doesn't want to get married. So people knew this man is not someone you should speak about marriage with. A few weeks later, this man was invited to a wedding. In most Muslim countries, weddings separate men and women. The men's wedding was held at a farmland somewhere deep in the desert. As he was driving alone at night to the wedding, he heard a woman screaming, "Please don't leave me, please help." He panicked and quickly turned on Quran in the car. Every time he hears the woman screaming, he would look outside and see a wolf. The screams wouldn't stop, and every time there was a scream, the same wolf would appear. He eventually made it to the wedding, and then he told a couple of people what happened to him on the way there. On the next day, he tells his good friend what happened. They both hop in the car in daylight and they go look for that woman. For hours, they were looking. They found traces from the wolf, but they didn't find anything else. A week later, this man went to a majlis, and he announces that he is convinced to get married for some reason. And everyone there was shocked. You, out of all people, want to get married all of a sudden. Something is not right. He had enough. He decided to go to a sheikh, and he tells him the full story. I hated marriage. I always got aggressive when someone brought it up. One day, when I drove to a wedding at night, I heard a woman screaming for help, but all I saw was a wolf. And then a few days later, I was convinced with getting an arranged marriage. Please explain what is happening to me. The sheikh laughs and tells him, you were attached by an admirer, a jinn that was emotionally attached to you. She made you hate getting married. The night you drove in the desert, she was following you. She tried to possess you, but she couldn't. And that wolf you saw killed the jinn. Jinns are known to be afraid of wolves because a wolf is the only animal that can take a jinn's life. And when you heard a woman scream, it was the jinn getting attacked. And now, you are no longer against marriage because the curse you had was killed by a wolf. This is a true horrifying story of the Ouija board. We all know what this piece of wood is capable of doing. And surprisingly, it's been around since the 1800s. And people are not aware of the dangers this game can bring. When a person wants to come in contact with jinns, the jinn must be invited by the human himself. They cannot communicate unless there is a portal, and the Ouija board is a portal. A very well-known Russian paranormal investigator wanted answers. He went alone to an abandoned house. It's one of the most haunted houses in the country. He took his Ouija board. He brought monitors, mics, many cameras, movement detectors, and a whole bunch of equipment. He lit up candles. He placed the Ouija board in the living room, and he invited the demon to come and play. Warning: I will be showing you real footage of what happened. Before he started, there were small movements detected. He sat down and asked the first question. Are you here now? The glass did not move, but as he placed his finger on the glass, this happened. He kept asking questions such as, was it you who moved the glass? Yes. Can you tell me your name? No. As the glass was still on top of no, he asked, so you won't tell me your name? And this happened. He asked, can you harm me? He asked again, do you wish me harm? He called this jinn out and asked to stop the game, but he doesn't know that it's too late. You opened the portal. They play by their rules now. They're not going anywhere if you ask them to leave. And chaos is what happened.
Я прощаюсь с тобой. Уходи. Твою мать.
This is real. Playing this game can kill you. You don't choose what jinn you play with. If you invite them in, they might stick around forever. Stay away from this board. This is a true horrifying story of the woman who converted to Islam. This story happened 6 months ago in January 2022. A Christian Colombian woman in her 30s lived in Colombia her whole life. She was a major sinner, but she was always intrigued about Islam. She always used to see Muslims praying, and she gets amazed with how spiritual it seems. Then she started reading more about Islam. Coincidentally, she got a job offer in Dubai, and she moved to the UAE in early 2022. She met with many sheikhs, and she asked the locals many questions about the religion. Then she learned more throughout her visit. One day, in January 2022, she went inside a mosque in Dubai to pray for the first time, and she felt a heartwarming, comforting feeling as she stepped inside the mosque. And that was the night she said, tomorrow I will take my shahada. That night, she goes home. She felt a sense of fear that cannot be explained. She was very scared for no reason, and she was very uncomfortable in her apartment. She read her Christian prayers for the last time before going to bed. She shut her eyes. and a few hours deep in her sleep, she felt something hit her head, and it immediately rushed her up. Her heart started racing immensely. It is dark in her room. She can't really see anything. Suddenly, something drags her from her feet, almost falling off the bed. This thing locked in her whole body and whispered in her ear, "Don't you dare convert to Islam. This religion is bad for you. Islam is evil." Whatever she thought that thing was, it was projecting different faces of her family members while it was talking, and then it let her go. And she realized that what happened was not a dream. This was a jinn, definitely a shaitan. It could have been her qareen. No one knows. The fact that it tried to deceive her was proof that her taking the shahada was very necessary. The thing that pisses them off the most is when you get closer to God. She was haunted by that same jinn for a while. Of course, until she memorized the adhkar. Jinns feed off of your sins. The more bad you do, the more they like you. But the more good you do, the more they starve. This is a true horrifying story of the Illuminati. The Illuminati is real. It is a real society that aims for world order. Their intent is world domination. They are also behind some of history's greatest revolutions and assassinations. They existed since the 18th century, and since then, they were always known for influencing political decisions. People confuse the Illuminati with the Freemasons. The Freemasons aren't exactly the Illuminati. The Freemasons evolved out of stonemasons and builders. The Illuminati recruited many Freemasons because they're known to be people with knowledge. There are ranks in the Freemasons. The higher you rank, the more privileged you get. Anybody who is a valuable asset for the Illuminati will have all their wishes granted, whether it was fame, money, or even both. And if you cross them, they will kill you. There are freaky videos on the deep web. These videos were posted on Twitter and YouTube, but they were removed very quick, where hidden cameras were snuck into many of their ritual events. Of course, invites only. The most famous influencers and artists were present at these events, and they would have the freakiest performances. In Islam, without a doubt, the three parties, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and the New World Order, are all linked, and they associate for one thing: the arrival of the Dajjal. There is no question about that. Muslims have been warned through the Hadith that a society will deceive nations across the globe, and they will be so powerful, they pretty much own the world. Ask yourself this: do you really think any organization in existence could be more powerful than any of these three parties? War does not require guns and missiles anymore. In the 21st century, war is way more complex than that. Influence is power, and they have that influence. We will definitely go through a world order. This will happen. The Dajjal has been appointed. Forget the jinn stories. If you were alive when this happens, it will be the most horrific thing you will ever go through. And we are weeks away from his arrival. This is a true horrifying story of the real Annabelle. We've all seen the Annabelle series of movies, such as The Conjuring, Annabelle, Annabelle Creation, and Annabelle Comes Home. The stars of these movies are Ed and Lorraine Warren, which are real people. Ed and Lorraine Warren are paranormal investigators. Ed died in 2006, and his wife Lorraine died in 2019. And boy, do they have the most haunted items in their home, which is now a museum for tourists around the globe. And guess what's inside this museum? The real Annabelle. Out of all four movies, the real story of the real-life Annabelle is the prequel, Annabelle Creation. This doll belonged to a child named Annabelle. She died in mid-1900s. Weeks after her death, the parents felt their daughter's spirit being present in their home by hearing her giggles and her footsteps running across the house. They were Catholics. In Islam, we don't believe in spirits being around us. In our religion, when a person dies, the spirit is taken to a different world, that is not parallel with our dimension. The paranormal beings that live among us are jinns, and they deceive family members by taking form and using voices of their deceased relatives, making them think that they are the lost loved ones. And that is exactly what happened in Annabelle's home. A jinn haunted that family. It used the form of their daughter and her voice while giggling. They eventually allowed that spirit to possess the daughter's doll. Now in real life, the demon didn't possess the doll. That's just an ordinary doll made out of plastic and cotton. In reality, when they invited the jinn to possess the doll, the jinn actually was invited into their home, and it used the doll to haunt them. This is a true story. An American-based film showed us the truth. It's not really a spirit of a little girl. It's a demon, and it used the doll as a tool to haunt this family. But the question is, if jinns don't really possess dolls, is the Annabelle doll safe to own? No, it's not. Because the jinn tied its legacy to that doll. And whoever takes the doll, takes the jinn with it. This is a true horrifying story, part 54. This story was submitted to me by someone I know very well. I want to stay away from the real names of the people from this story. This story took place in Dubai a couple of years ago. There's an area in Dubai called Al-Rashdiya. In that area, there used to be a center for ruqya, which can also be called an exorcism center. There were many sheikhs there that used to treat people that were infected with black magic and also treat people that were possessed by jinns. This center was for charity. They took no fees to treat people. The narrator of the story, the person I know, he was just a volunteer in that center. He's not really experienced with severe cases. One day, they received a call from a family that had a very tough case. This special case needed its own appointment. Many exorcists were appointed for this specific session. It was a Palestinian man that was possessed by a jinn that was a ashiq. And this man was brought in speaking Urdu. For those who don't know, Urdu is not a common language to be spoken by Palestinians. Urdu is a language that is used in some parts in India and Pakistan. The man and his family were never taught nor spoke this language before. So the sheikhs immediately knew that the jinn that possessed that man was an Urdu speaker. They put him in a room, and all he was doing was screaming words in Urdu. They started the ruqya session, and it took 8 men to hold this man down on the chair. He was shouting and laughing the whole time, ridiculing the exorcists. It's a common behavior from jinns when they possess humans. He started mumbling words in Urdu that only one of the exorcists understood. I love this man. You are weak. He will not be back to this place again. Took them hours of suffering. This man was out of control. He was possessed by a power they have never witnessed before. After hours of suffering, he was released. And then they asked him if he remembers what happened. But the man didn't know where he was. They asked the family to come back for another session in a few days, but they never came back. They tried to reach out to that family, but no one knows what happened to them. That was the last time this man and his family were ever seen. This is a true horrifying story of Hamdan School in Uganda. This school is an Islamic boarding school for girls. It was donated by one of the royal family members of Dubai 22 years ago. This story was submitted by Afra. An Arabic girl back in 2009 was a student at this high school. She knew that the school was haunted and that there was a graveyard right behind the school. And she heard rumors of many incidents where girls were possessed by jinns. But everything else about the school seems fine, because it's one of the most successful Islamic boarding schools in that region. But that does not deny the fact that jinns may live inside the school. Afra experienced something, and being in her 30s today, this one incident will always haunt her. Afra had a mutual friend that was a student in that same school. She was regularly possessed by one jinn. Out of all the religious students, she was one of the very few that didn't really care about the Islamic education. She always used to party, drink, hangs out with guys, and the jinn that used to possess her was surprisingly a Muslim. He was just furious that she used to disobey her family and her religion. They brought her to one of the halls in the school and they started a ruqya session. Afra was there witnessing the whole thing. After many attempts of trying to make this jinn speak, he finally responded. I am possessing this girl because she disobeys. I will not leave until she changes. They were all shocked and they proceed with the recitation. The moment they stop, just for a few seconds, the possessed girl stares at Afra. Who is this girl? Why is she very quiet? She is very pretty, very nice, but I cannot go near her. Afra froze in her place. She felt numb all around and she was not able to move a single muscle. The Imam was intrigued, so he asks the jinn, why can't you go near her? What is stopping you? It was a back and forth questioning. The jinn kept saying, I can't. Why can't you? Until it responded. There is someone in front of her with light. What does that mean? They ask. There is someone in front of her with light. I can't go near her. They couldn't interpret what this was exactly. It could have been the veil of light from the adhkar. But regardless, Afra will never forget the demon's eyes staring deep into her soul, wanting to possess her. This is a true horrifying story of the most haunted house in Libya, Hosh al-Sittin. Hosh means house and Sittin means 60. This house is known amongst the majority of Libyan people. It's been abandoned for many years and it's the only house in that whole deserted area, and it is infested with jinns. There are hundreds of stories about this abandoned house, and everyone that's been there experienced horrible things. There are stories about people that have spent nights inside this house and they died a few days later. Whatever entity lives inside that house does not want you in there, period. In haunted places, jinns don't usually intimidate their guests right away. But in this place, people have reported children and baby cries minutes after walking inside. Many years ago, there was a group of soldiers that temporarily camped behind the house for a few days. There was a military procedure going on in that area. They didn't look at the house, nor did they bother going anywhere near it. On the first day, late at night, the men started hearing screams of a little boy shouting for help inside that house. They were all terrified from the noises. They knew that there was no boy inside that house. That was a jinn. All of them came close and they flashed their torches at the house from a distance. But there was no sign of anyone inside. One of the soldiers ridiculed the situation and he goes inside. See, there's nothing that can harm us, he said. Later on that night, the noises eventually stopped. A few weeks later, that same man was driving down the road of that house. It was dark and it was raining heavily outside. He sees a cat in the middle of the street and he swerves. The car immediately loses control and one of the axles breaks. The car wouldn't start. He didn't know where he was exactly. So he hops out the car and there it is. The house, Hosh al-Sittin, was right in front of him. He knew the close call of a fatal car crash could have been intentional. No one knows. Do they want him back inside? Or did they want to kill him because of what he did?